You close your grip, you align your sights, you ease the slack up to the wall. A poignant calm lingers, and a sense of what's to come. And then, in one singularly timeless moment of clarity, bang! You and your HK P9S exist as one. You feel what it feels, you know what it knows. The pistol in your hands becomes indistinguishable from the essence of your being. And that's what I call 9mm Nirvana. And that's what we're going to be talking about today here on Hipster Tactical. Alright, HK P9S. Really excited to finally share this on the channel. Ever since I got this gun a couple months ago, started getting some rounds through it, it became clear to me that this gun was special. And of all the handguns I've owned and shot over the past 10 years, and it's quite a few, as you can probably imagine, I've never found anything that shoots quite like this. The gun just has this uniquely direct sensation as you're shooting it, like you're somehow closer to the shot you're taking. You just have this very intimate sense of connection with every shot you take, and it's, like I said, it's unlike anything else, and that's because this gun uses a fixed barrel, like a Walther PPK or a Makarov. This is my East German Makarov, and I reviewed that this summer. In that review, I talked about how accurate this gun is and just how accurate fixed barrels are in general in handguns. This gun is no exception. And that's why HK wanted to have a fixed barrel in their service pistols, because it's inherently accurate and it just shoots very well. But with a typical fixed barrel straight blowback design like a PPK or a Makarov, you experience kind of this nasty, abrasive, punchy recoil sensation that can be kind of distracting and unpleasant. The P9S, while one, shooting more powerful calibers, full power 9mm, and this gun was also made in 45, it doesn't have that kind of nasty, punchy recoil impulse that you get with a fixed barrel straight blowback gun normally. The recoil impulse is super smooth, super soft, and it just feels great, yet it still has that uniquely direct sensation like any fixed barrel gun. It's just really cool how they accomplish that, and how they accomplish that is with the roller delayed blowback mechanism. It's one of those things that just seems to fascinate gun hipsters, and anytime you get a gun with rollers, we'd all just kind of geek out on it. And another one that's often gets compared to the HK P9S is the CZ52. I'll get into the differences a little bit, and I plan to do like another video that discusses roller mechanisms in guns a little more in depth. But the CZ52 uses a roller locked mechanism. It's basically like a mini MG42 machine gun, whereas the P9S uses the roller delayed mechanism, and that's what you find on H&K's G3 rifle and the MP5. So how does the P9S mitigate the frenetic, unpleasant recoil characteristics of its fixed barrel cousins? I'm glad you asked, O ardent seeker of gun hipster wisdom. We shall abscond to the Hipster Tactical Technical Bench. Alright, welcome to the Hipster Tactical Technical Bench, which is actually my kitchen table. So, you'll notice here I have a bolt and a bolt carrier of an AR-15. And to kind of start to understand how the H&K's roller delayed system works, which is sometimes called the Vorglamer action, after Ludwig Vorglamer, the guy who designed it, it helped me to kind of get in the frame of reference of how an AR-15 bolt worked. Because interestingly, this system that's used on the HK P9S was originally designed for an assault rifle back in the 40s called the Sturmgewehr 45, which was kind of a experimental prototype. That's kind of where the system originated, and then it progressed through the Spanish Setme rifles in the 50s, and then ultimately into the G3 rifle, which the German army used throughout most of the Cold War. So if we think about how an AR-15 action works, it's got this telescoping bolt head that kind of goes in and out of the bolt carrier, and that's what locks and unlocks the action. So the P9S has a similar setup, and I guess that's not surprising considering it was originally designed for a rifle. So here, essentially, this back part here, this middle part, is the bolt carrier, and then you have this bolt head here, and you see how it goes, how it goes back and forth, and it's spring-loaded in there. And so that's kind of the same idea. You've got a bolt carrier and a kind of bolt head that moves back and forth, only this doesn't lock. Instead of that, instead of the rotation that locks and unlocks the bolt, because AR-15 is a locked breech design, this uses very small rollers, which I'll show you. Alright, so this is the bolt head of the P9S, and you can see little mini rollers right there. And when this thing is installed on the bolt carrier, this thing right here, this pokey looking thing, that's the firing pin, and then this goes through the center of the space here in the bolt head, and that thing forces these rollers out to the side. So this is the P9S barrel, and you see these kind of prongs that come back, and you can see how the prongs kind of fit in there, and then when these rollers are sticking out to the side like this, like that, you can see them on, they would pop out the sides when they're on that. They kind of engage these little nooks here. You can see these little nooks that are machined into these prongs and come back off the barrel. And so they're kind of stuck in there, and that creates a rolling resistance as, the gas pressure is blowing the bolt head back toward the bolt carrier. Also, the rollers roll against these very precise angles here on this thing. That's where they roll against. And there was a lot of R&D that went into the geometry of these angles so they could slow down the rollers enough to create enough of a delay to preclude the need for any kind of fully locked mechanism. I think that's why the action and the recoil impulse just feels a little slower and more relaxed, and it allows it to filter out some of that harshness that you typically get in a fixed barrel design. So just ingenious engineering on the part of H&K. And the G3 rifle that the German Bundeswehr uses and the MP5, they all use a facsimile of this system, which again is sometimes known as the Vorglamer system. And the roller delayed system, the Vorglamer system, evolved from the roller locked system. So this is the slide of my CZ52, which uses a roller locked system. And the roller locked system traces its heritage back to the MG42. This works just about like any other lock breech action, in that you have a barrel that moves back with the slide. The rollers are just the thing that connect the barrel on the slide, whereas the roller delayed action, the Vorglamer action, it's basically predicated on a fixed barrel, and the rollers are just creating rolling resistance to kind of delay the opening of the action and contain the blast before the ejection port opens. Alright, welcome back. So with that technical context in mind, I think it's interesting that HK essentially took an assault rifle action and put it in a handgun. That may seem kind of strange, like why would they do that? But if you look at where H&K was as a company and what products they were offering in the mid-60s when this gun started to be developed, it makes sense. So as of 1966, H&K didn't offer any handguns. They had developed the G3 rifle, and that was being adopted by the Bundeswehr, and they had just developed the MP5 submachine gun. Instead of reinventing the wheel, or in this case, the roller, they basically decided to take what they knew and what they were seeing a ton of success with, and that is the roller delayed mechanism, the Vorglimmer action, and they had already taken that from the G3 and kind of crunched it down into a submachine gun for the MP5. So, you know, why wouldn't a pistol work? Why not a pistol? So that's basically what they did. Initially, the gun was designed in single action, and they only made a couple hundred examples of the initial single action only version, which was called the P9. And then they decided to add a double action mechanism, and then they added the S, which I forget what the German word for the S, but the S refers to the double action mechanism. And so then the HK P9S was ready to roll into the disco era like a fresh 8-ball into a bathroom at Studio 54. And when I think about the competitive context of other handguns that were out there at that time, you had the 1911 obviously, and you had the the Walther P38, P1 guns, the post-war variants, good guns. You had the Browning high power, obviously, but I'm just not sure there was anything that offered the level of precision and just rugged toughness and just raw accuracy that the P9S was bringing to the table in the early 70s. The German GSG-9 unit adopted this. The Japanese Special Armed Police adopted it. The Royal Malaysian Police adopted it, which we'll get to. This one served with the Royal Malaysian Police. And finally, the U.S. Navy SEALs adopted it in 1978. I guess it was the only pistol that could withstand being routinely soaked and suppressed. This thing was, like I said, the premier kind of combat pistol of its day. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about a time before the Beretta 92 was introduced in the like mid to late 70s, and before Walther developed their P38, P1 platform into the P5. And it was before the SIG P200 series was born too, and that came later in the 70s. So certainly those guns closed the gap on the P9S. Now I'll say there are few guns I'd say I shoot better than a Walther P5 and a Beretta 92, but on any given day the P9S might be one of them. So with the P9S, accuracy is just something you feel. The recoil is just distilled into this just seamlessly smooth impulse that engages and informs as you're taking your shot.
I think that
it's what?
The spray might be like when it would eject, it would like catch the shell as it was.
In some ways, it's just very enlightening, to continue with the hokey Buddhist Nirvana metaphor. There's just no question about how and where your shots are going to hit, because the gun just tells you. The recoil just comes through this fixed barrel, and you just have a very immediate sense of what's going on with your shot as you take it. And in single action, the trigger is nothing special. You know, it's got some take up, and then you get a nice firm wall that's easy to index against and a clean break. The muzzle barely rises when the gun cycles, and the whole process of just aiming and hitting your point of aim is very instinctive, and it's because of that fixed barrel. Like we said, the roller delayed system filters out the unpleasantness that you typically get in a fixed barrel gun, and what you're left with, you know, as you're shooting is just something that's pure. It's almost like the presence of the gun, it diminishes the presence of the gun in your hand, and it's like, it's the closest you're going to come to like shooting bullets out of your own hand. And if you think about Buddhism, where your sense of self, you kind of unlearn your sense of self as being separate from the whole of reality. And that's kind of what this gun does. It's it kind of brings you closer to the shot you're taking, and it's this seamless experience of shooting that is really unlike anything else I've ever experienced, and that's why I love this gun, and it's just awesome. And when I think of how this gun shoots, I think of the Beretta PX4, and not because they necessarily shoot the same way, but while they're different in terms of how they feel and your connection to the gun as you're shooting it, they both sort of achieve the same thing, and that is just seamless, intuitive accuracy that's predicated on feel. The P9S kind of accomplishes that by, as I've described, kind of bringing you closer to the shot. It gives you this very direct sensation of the shot, whereas the PX4, I think it plays a little bit more to the senses. It turns the recoil into this super plush, super soft, very communicative feel that's just super engaging and informative as you're shooting. So those two guns stand out in my mind as just kind of the most intuitive shooters of all the guns I've tried. They are just the most natural, the most instinctive. On any given day, I think I can probably carve out slightly tighter groups with a PX4, but it's pretty close with this, and I think the ergonomics and the sights and the trigger are all just a little better on the PX4. And this is a 40-year-old gun, so you know the ergonomics are good. The trigger's fine, but and the sights are okay, but it's not up to the standards of you know those nuances on a modern gun. I'll also say that this gun has been 100% reliable in, I'd say, 400-ish rounds I've put through it in the couple months I've owned it. And I've put all kinds of ammunition through it. I've put some, you know, cheap remanufactured ammo through it. It works perfectly with everything. I've put a few random hollow points through it, worked with that. So it's a solid, reliable gun, and again, it was known for that. Now, I will say that the gun gets kind of dirty when you're shooting it, and that is just a function of shooting without a lock breech. When the chamber isn't sealed, as it is in a lock breech, when you're shooting, it just blows more shit back onto the breech face and onto the feed ramp and everything, and you know that's what you experience with any fixed barrel gun, straight blowback gun like this. And I've also heard that the G3 and the MP5 are known to run kind of dirty, but the thing is, they run, and they're known to run and run and run. As we know, HK doesn't make unreliable firearms, and I tend to think the rolling action of the Vorglimmer system, it probably just kind of literally rolls through soot and muck better than some actions, because again, it doesn't have any hard edges that have to unlock and lock and you know rotate and tilt and everything like that, which crud could potentially you know, gum up and cause a stoppage, whereas this thing just rolls straight through it all. And I think that's just the nature of the beast with these roller delayed actions, is they're known to get dirty, but dirt doesn't stop them. Another thing that's interesting is the extractor of the P9S guns is mounted on the top of the breech face. Honestly, I'm not sure why you don't see top-mounted extractors more often in guns, because you know, if you think about the geometry of the feed cycle, as the round is hitting the ramp and then the back end's kicking up, you know, the back end's going to kick up straight in to the extractor claw, as opposed to kind of threading the needle while it's still kind of at an angle with a side-mounted extractor. If you have at all been interested in these guns and you've read about them online, no doubt you've read about the buffer situation. And to kind of assist the roller delayed blowback mechanism in making this gun, you know, just buttery smooth to shoot, it uses a plastic polyurethane recoil buffer right here. This will degrade. The plastic they use will degrade over time, and at some point it will need to be replaced. And if you shoot the gun with a bad or just non-existent buffer, you will damage the gun. And my gun actually, I'll roll in some photos, but my gun actually shows signs of being shot with a bad buffer, and there's some peening on the slide. But you know, it survived that and it works fine. But if you get one of these things, unless you know for sure that this buffer has been replaced, you know, somewhat recently, you're going to have to get in there and replace it. People kind of downplay it online, like, you know, it's as easy as changing your briefs. But in my experience, it's more like changing an oversized butt plug, because it is a major pain in the ass. At least it was for me. It's just put in there in a strange way, and it's in this metal slot where you can't really get at it, you can't really see it, you don't know what's going on with it. It's screwed in like a strange way where you have these kind of coaxial screws where you've got to screw them together. And as brilliantly and elegantly as the rest of this gun is in terms of engineering, that feature, the whole buffer system, just seems... It seems like they just kind of said, well, we'll throw a buffer in it somehow. And it's like they didn't... I think they could have designed a system that was maybe a little more self-contained, a little more seamless and plug and play to maintain, and, you know, not this three-handed process where you have to compress the buffer and screw in 2 different screws and possibly trim the buffer to fit or not trim the buffer, and it's just a pain in the butt. I actually had a gunsmith help me do it. Gunsmith I've used here locally. If you're near the Cincinnati area, you might check them out. That's Schlosser Gunsmithing in Newport on Mama Street, and they did a great job kind of fitting my buffer and getting it in there, and the gun runs perfectly. I actually filmed my attempt to do it myself, and it was an epic fail, which is kind of funny. So you can kind of relish in my misfortune as I'm attempting to do this. I'll post that other video here and put a link in the description. I'll also add that the double action trigger on this gun, if you read about it at all in forums, you'll eventually come across people complaining about the double action trigger on this gun. And yeah, I'll say by most conventional metrics, the double action trigger on this gun blows. It's heavy, it's long, and it feels like it's a staple gun somehow driven by rubber bands, and that's not an exaggeration. You know, they say HK triggers feel like staple guns sometimes, and I think this is why. It's just not a super pleasant double action gun or double action trigger to use. But I will say, I shoot this gun pretty accurately in double action. Honestly, I shoot this gun better in double action than some other guns that have better feeling double action triggers. I shoot this one better. And I think that's because while the tension on the double action trigger itself feels kind of odd, like it has that rubbery staple gunny feel, there's not like a lot of stacking or a hitch or a catch or something that kind of throws off your pull. And then the double action stroke takes you right up to the brake. You can get real close to the brake, and then there's not a ton of over travel as the trigger kind of skips to the back of the trigger guard, and you know, which often makes the gun bounce in your hand, it makes the sight bounce, and sometimes I think that affects accuracy. I don't experience that with this gun, and even though the pull feels kind of odd and heavy and everything, the gun stays straight when the hammer falls in double action, the sight stays straight, and I hit what I'm aiming at. So I don't mind it. Now, that said, obviously this is a double action, single action gun. You have to get it in double action after you chamber a round. You have to decock it, and if you've read anything about these guns, you know the decocking process is kind of odd. And the P9S gets ridiculed for this because you basically have to, you know, use this lever here on the side. You have to engage the lever, pull the trigger, and then let the lever out, like so. And people just crucify the P9S for making you pull the trigger while you're decocking the gun. But here's the thing. HK wants you to put the safety on while you do that. And if you put the safety on, there's no possible way you can accidentally fire the gun. Even if you were to, like, pull the trigger first, the safety puts a hammer block on and you will not fire the gun. And the HK P9S manual even tells you to do that. So there's proof that HK doesn't hate you. They care. They really care. They want you to put this safety on while you decock the P9S. Another thing that you can do with this gun is carry it cocked and locked. Because this safety isn't a decocker, this is your decocking and cocking lever. You just put that on and you can carry it cocked and locked like a 1911. Another interesting thing with this lever, in addition to, you know, being your decocker, I just decocked it, it is also your cocker. So the gun's decocked in double action now, and I put this, I hit the lever, and now it's in single action. I just cocked it. This is a hammer-fired gun, but the hammer is concealed inside the back of the slide. And it has a cocking indicator here on the back. Now it's cocked, you can see the indicator, and then I'll decock it. Now it's decocked, and you don't see the indicator protruding. So, you know, it's different, and it's odd, and I think some things that are just different and not what we're used to, they are unfairly denigrated in modern gun culture, but the system works fine. If you follow what you're supposed to do, it's perfectly safe and it's perfectly usable. You know, if you look at my shooting videos, I'm decocking the gun rather quickly, and it's pretty easy to do. So as far as practical use for one of these, do you depend on an older kind of out of production gun like this for self-defense and concealed carry and so forth? And, you know, I think the internet wants you to think that carrying an old gun like this is just crazy. You know, why would you carry this thing when you can carry a brand new fill in the blank? I challenge anyone who would say that to shoot a P9S. And I think right away it's going to make a case for itself as to why it's a valid option for a self-defense weapon. And when you have a gun that shoots extremely well and you feel confident with, and it's 100% reliable, I feel that qualifies it as a serious defense weapon. That's how I feel about this one. I carry it sometimes. It's, you know, not my go-to. I didn't get it for that. I don't think it'll ever be my go-to, but the one thing that is nice about it, it's got a pretty thin profile. The slide is about the width of, I'd say, 1911. You know, we're talking inch or slightly under. So it's reasonably comfortable to carry in the appendix position. I think if you get one of these and you shoot it well and you prove it's reliable, why not? I will say with the P9S especially, it has a lot of specialized parts, and you're gonna have to be conscious of especially your buffer and some of these screws, that you don't screw those up. And you're gonna have to make sure you have the parts to keep this gun running. So in conclusion, back in the 70s, this was the best handgun in the world. And I guess that begs the question, is it still? Obviously, the past 50 years have given us just countless innovations in, you know, firearms technology and firearms design. You know, the past 50 years have given us just countless options, especially when it comes to handguns for self-defense and everything like that. But I'll say that one thing the past 50 years has not given us is anything that shoots quite like the P9S. It was revolutionary then, and it's revolutionary today. The roller delayed blowback system this gun uses gives you a shooting feel that's unlike anything else. And basically, there has never been another handgun except the Koch PRS and like the Corofilla HSP 701, which are, again, like 5-figure guns. There's never been another normal gun that's used this roller delay system. So this is unprecedented in the history of handguns. And so, as your gun hipster guru, if you seek true spiritual growth as an astute purveyor of pew, seek an HK P9S, and ye may yet achieve 9mm Nirvana. Thank you so much for watching.